Hello, my name is Shawn White, and I'm here to offer you some of my experience so that you can decide whether it's wisdom. Sometimes when we're manipulated, it feels like our aggressor concocted some kind of super scheme to steal away our agency and glee. I think those circumstances are few and far between. Most people lack the brain power and discipline to stay on task for very long. Like most times in life, we move from impulse to impulse, feeling to feeling, making the most of what we have to work with. I don't know, Shawn. I've been in some situations where there is no way they couldn't have had a plan that wasn't to my detriment. I've met people who seem to be in the right place at the right time, seizing almost like they're cultivating a moment so they can seize it in order to take advantage of us. An example of that is, whenever I was going through, after I had my lung removed, there was a gentleman named Eno who had, he told me, he says, well, Shawn, if you start chemotherapy and you don't have anyone to take care of you, you're going to die. And so quickly, I, searched out for someone to take care of me because, after I had my lung removed, I was terrified. I hadn't just gone through all of that just to die throughout chemo. I didn't want that to happen. So I asked around, and I had no one who was available. And unfortunately, during that time, I didn't realize that I could reach out to services or through my insurance and find a caretaker that could come in and help me survive this atrocious process. And so he swept in. He's like, hey, I can live with you. And if I live with you, then, I could stay here for free, and I'll have a room upstairs and you free rent, and I can, eat some of your food, but I can make the meals for you. You can clean up your house. I can change your cat litter box. I can make sure you're getting to the doctor. Now, that situation turned to absolute horror, and I'll save the details for that in another discussion. But that was, he created that situation so that he could seize the moment, sweep in, be the good guy, but not actually have to meet the expectations that were discussed before that moment. How could that not be a situation where it was pre-planned? How could it not be someone who lives a life taking advantage of other people to their own personal gain? That's got to be premeditated, right? That has to be premeditated. I don't see any other way. I think that in a lot of situations, we have the tendency to see the worst in others. And when we hurt, we have a tendency to dehumanize other people. We think that somehow they have the autonomy, the intelligence, the emotional maturity, in order to make the right decisions. And the reality is that all people typically move from moment to moment, second to second, trying to mitigate their own suffering. Whenever I look at that scene, right? When I look at that scene and I reflect on it and I feel the emotions of whenever I was there, sure, absolutely. It's easy to want to, pick up your pitchforks and torches and burn that person to the ground for how they egregiously wounded you in your most vulnerable point in life. But the reality here is that if you want to live a fulfilling, harmonious, and peaceful existence, you must offer empathy to other people. You've got to humble yourself, and you also must creatively navigate your situations. When I look at that circumstance, I don't see a man who manipulated his way into having a free ride. What I see was a guy who had a friend who was hurting, and he was trying to do something right. I think he was genuinely trying to do a good thing. And I think that in general, I think people try to do a good thing. But I think that once he got into that spot and he fell into that position, I think that he returned to his old patterns. In life, whenever we if we're not used to taking the higher road, our legs are not going to be strong enough to endure the slope as the challenge increases. And we tend to revert back to our comfort zone of taking the lower road or simply not taking any road at all. And I think what happened was that you have a guy who was already in a position that he's suffering in life. And once he realized that the obligation that he stepped into was far worse than what he thought it was going to be, required a lot more work. I have to believe that there was something in him that was good, but he just failed. He failed. And then once he started failing, he moved from moment to moment, trying to mitigate his suffering by taking bad decisions. And each bad decision led to another bad decision and another bad decision. And because you're in that state that you're hurting, you're suffering because you're embarking on immoral actions, it makes it more difficult to make the right action. And I'm not excusing what he did, but instead I see what I attempt to do is see it from his eyes, to see it objectively, to try to process what happened through a lens of love and have compassion for the man, even though he hurt me. Because life isn't about brimstone and fire. It's not about burning other people to the ground. It's not about canceling people for the mistakes that they made. It's about searching for opportunities to offer redemption, to offer forgiveness. Sure, I will probably never reconcile with that man because of the egregious nature of that circumstance. And, I learned my lesson. But deep inside of my heart, I hope that he learned from the experience. I hope that he never puts himself in that circumstance again, and that he pursues a life of love, that he strengthens his legs so that he can always soldier forward and overcome the challenges that he faces and avoid the regret that puts us back into a position where we have the tendency to backslide and do the easy things that are the most pleasurable in the moment. Because when we do the right thing, it's uncomfortable typically because the right thing is hard. But the beautiful thing about doing the right thing is that you don't regret it in the future. And regret is the worst emotion you can feel because it doesn't go away. So whenever you embark on this journey of bad, it just becomes a snowball effect that further ruins your existence because your propensity to do evil just continues to grow. That evil selfishness. And to escape it is hard. Because once you're in that spot where you're doing bad things to others and you're deriving either comfort or joy or gain from it, and you look at the other side and you see that there is typically no comfort, joy, or gain whenever you do the right thing, at least on the immediate level, you're going to revert back to the bad. You're going to keep taking that low road. So when I reflect on that memory, I look at that situation, I say, Shawn, I hope that he grew from it. I hope that he is living his best life. I hope that he's surrounded by people who love him and he's being guided to a greater place. And then he becomes a lighthouse in the storm so that other people who are sailing their ships in those treacherous waters can be inspired by him. So that he can become a leader, so they can learn from his hardships and they can learn to avoid them themselves.